All right, it's 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock Central Standard Time. So we want to go ahead and kick off because we have a very dynamic and multi-dimensional presentation for the audience this afternoon. But I'd like to begin by giving thanks to Kelly Fitzpatrick and our Chicago revenue team for hosting this webinar series with 4.6 trillion in IT investments, with a little less than 70% of those in supply chain in 2023, and even more capital investments in AI automation and technology enterprise-wide transformation initiatives expected in 2024. On behalf of RGP, we felt like this was a unique opportunity to get in front of each of you that are in attendance today and those that may be listening to the recording at a later date, to share some critical insights and proven techniques for how you can capture return on investment for technology investments, both at an enterprise level and across the functional areas of the business. So with that, for those that do not know, next slide, I just want to briefly introduce RGP. So many of you may be familiar with RGP, but I just want to give a quick oversight. We are a globally traded public company that operates in 37 countries around the world, with a revenue of about 776 million reported, 4,000 professionals worldwide. We work with obviously Fortune 50, 100, and 500 clients, but we also work really well with private equity firms, middle market accounts, even have done transformational and consulting projects with pre-revenue startup companies or smaller companies that are looking to go public or potentially IPO in the future. So we also offer a portfolio of services and solutions in our consulting practice that spans finance and accounting, business transformation, which includes change management, project management, supply chain, tech and digital, data analytics. All of that gives us a robust portfolio to support our clients in a number of different ways, and potentially support some of you in the future that may be listening to this webinar. I want to thank my esteemed colleagues, Ken Taylor, Patricia Reyes, Kathy Paisley, all for helping to collaborate and put this presentation together. And over the next 50 minutes, we will be going through some very critical and detailed, comprehensive information that covers change management, project management, an examination of generative AI and migration to the cloud. So what are the emerging trends that CEOs and CFOs are most interested in? And then we'll conclude with a brief overview of supply chain resiliency. We will, from a logistics perspective, just for those that are in participation live, you can post your questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring those and either responding to them in real time, or we will hold those questions to the end and answer as many of them as we can. We will send out a copy of the recording and a copy of the presentation at the conclusion of the webinar. So with that being said, I appreciate all of you making time to join us this afternoon. We look forward to a fruitful conversation. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ken Taylor.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Program and project management has changed radically over the last decade, and that pace of change has gotten greater. So what I want to talk about with you now is some of the trends that we're seeing that are changing the way we deliver and changing the way we manage that delivery. So if we talk about some of the macro trends that are driving that strategy, these are trends that are impacting some of our highest priority initiatives, digital initiatives, transformation, even those big projects that's trying to remake our core. The focus on that transformational investment will continue to be high going forward. But what's switched is that now, instead of being a breakaway strategy, it's become more and more about parity. Since everyone else in my industry is spending a lot of time and effort on digital and transformation strategies and customer lock-ins and things like that, I have to make a large investment just to retain that parity. And in the face of that, we have some continued high project failures. We've redefined the way we talk about project success. It's no longer about, did I meet the time? Did I meet the cost? It's really about, did I achieve the business objectives? And if we measure projects by that rubric, then we're finding that only about 30% of our projects are successful. And the rate is even lower for these large, painful, transformational projects. Our failure rate continues to be high. And our investment in digital initiatives hasn't always moved the needle to be able to get to that business value. In the face of that, we're seeing some resource shortages, shortfalls within traditional delivery organizations. So, where those delivery organizations have staffed in the past some of these transformations, now they're down by about 1/3. They have 1/3 less capacity than is being demanded. And that's shifted into a democratization of our delivery organizations. So, as much now, much more now than previously, we'll have a non-traditional leader that's leading a large transformational activity. And so with all of these trends together, what typically has happened in a traditional program and project management environment is we lock down, we get really rigid, we want to control the process, we throw in more gates and things like that. Now, that has proven to be a big failure point over the last 5 years. What we want to talk to you about is how we change that and how we change the way we deliver business value. So now it's all about delivery agility. Rather than locking down, how can we get digital? Or rather, how do we get agile? Now, as you think about that, think about your project leader. And let's talk about them as a project leader, because they may not be a project manager. They may have a very different title. But think of that project leader more as a point guard than as a quarterback, because it's not about control. It's about being able to get on the court, read the players, read the positioning, be able to build the play into the game, but then also be able to sacrifice the play to be able to win the game. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about delivery agility. And there are four components of delivery agility that we have found to be very important as we talk about this evolving world. So I want to drill into each one of those: visibility, collaboration, value focus, and the last would be resource ambidexterity. If we talk about collaboration, this is a real experience that we had, that making tools and solutions available that bring the team together. So on a recent transformation activity, it was composed of internal and external resources, very geographically dispersed. What was interesting about this initiative was that it included not only a internal personnel sponsored by a non-traditional leader. It had third-party participation from not only a governance group, outside governance, but also the customer was involved in the requirements and putting things together. Being able to put that whole team together and break down those organizational and geographic lines allowed them to move much more fluidly and make corrections as they went along. Visibility, being able to have everybody see the same thing. As I had spoken about with that collaboration team, now they see the important components that say how they're doing. How healthy is my project? What's the next critical task that needs to be performed? Are we moving in the right direction, and can we adjust dynamically based on being able to do this? Successful companies that are moving the biggest initiatives are those that aren't afraid of transparency and sharing that information on where we are, because it makes everyone that much more faster and flexible. Talking about value focus and business value, I want to talk about two aspects of that. One would be being able to have solutions and tools that completely reduce the administrative burden. We have way too much burden on the way we traditionally deliver projects and programs. This is a real life experience with a 50 project manager organization. that they were able to realize an NPV of almost $1 million in savings by just reducing administrative burden. Now, what that translated into for their organization is about a 10% capacity improvement with known resources, already trained, know how things work, everything else like that. Think about how wonderful it would be to be able to realize that bump in capacity and be able to get that much more done because we've reduced the burden of our delivery. And then the other area of value focus that leaders follow is that we translate success into those things that actually talk about value. So, for example, if I make all of this information available, I no longer talk about a project in terms of how many days until it has to complete or what's my percentage completion. I now talk about a 1 month delay equals a 300K loss in potential revenue. A project has 100K worth of financial slack until I'm in trouble. A failure equals a 25% contraction in our market share. When we're talking in that way, all of a sudden we engage the entire organization in a mission rather than in a date or a timeline or something like that. The last area I wanted to bring up is one that is most critical and is one of the most challenging, and that is being able to get to this resource ambidexterity. Once again, think of the point guard, not the quarterback. So I want resources, and we've modeled our internal organization and the resources that we bring in on a model like this that says that they think globally, they have a portfolio perspective. We're willing to sacrifice my project to be able to achieve the overall portfolio value. We are thinking in terms of business outcomes rather than, once again, my schedule or my budget. I want to be able to deliver a business outcome that will allow me to change how I prioritize things and how I utilize my resources. I'm going to be resilient through that execution. Mike Tyson said that you can go into a fight with a plan until somebody starts throwing punches. Execution resiliency is about taking the punch and being able to react appropriately. Those things, those assumptions that we always make, they change radically once we get into execution. And then the last is being able to have resources that have kind of this continuous learning kind of bias. An interesting piece of research shows that people that have a plethora of certifications, that chase certifications and things like this, it's a great measure for that hunger for learning. If you see somebody that's constantly doing that kind of thing, it's not so much about puffing, it's sometimes about learning more and seeing more. So as I talked through those 4 components that we feel are very important, those help us deliver project success. But project success doesn't translate into business value and business value realization unless our organization can adapt for those components that are being built. So what I want to do is turn the time over to Pat. Pat will take us through the organization change management approach that is the way to deliver that business value success.
Thanks, Ken. Good morning and good afternoon to all. Pat Reyes, Vice President here in the Change Management Practice at RGP. And what I'd like to do is spend some time and just talk through change management, some research and best practices, and how we do need to focus on making a project successful, right, and reaching sustainment and realization. A focus on change management really helps us mitigate the risks around the people side of change. Next slide, please. So as we take a moment to consider, Ken, if you can move to the next slide. There we go. Thank you. So as we take just a moment to consider the intersection of project and program management and change management, it's not just about getting things installed. And we do a great job in firms and organizations in doing that. But it's also about making things and those changes really work for us, making them stick. So right through not only adoption is critical, but also about sustainment, because we've always had those moments of, didn't we do this before? So we try not to have to do that with installation, adoption, and sustainment, to really focus on the people side of change. So we spend time talking, we'll spend some time talking through change management, the research and best practice, as I mentioned. And really the real magic happens when we turn the plans into actual benefits. That's what's called realization. So those objectives as you have as leaders, now you making them real, right? The realization, the numbers work, you're saving, you're expanding the organization. It's not just enough for the system to work. People need to embrace it as well, right? Different ways of working, new ways of working, new ways of thinking, mindset shifts. Adoption is like a secret sauce. The more people are on board, the less resistance to the changes occur. And resistance is quite costly to an organization. And people don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to resist, right? There's many components there. Why we do as humans resist change. So what we want to do as leaders is have less disruption to the business. We want to have a better impact, right, to the bottom line. Outcomes delivered on time, on budget, right, with greater proficiency and adoption of what it is that, technology or any services or any changes that we're installing. Next slide, please. So the only certainty, right, for many of us, not only in business and life, is change, right? Most organizations weathered many changes in the last several years. And, I raise my hand, I think we all do. It's a dynamic situation and environment today. It is a testament to the dynamics of and the nature of corporate environments. That is what we know. That is what we do. And it doesn't stop there. The expectations of major initiatives continues to grow. We're constantly changing, understanding that we can't stay consistent and constant all the time, that we need to have movement in the organization and in technology. And technology is actually wrapped around most of these initiatives here that you see, right? From a cultural changes to restructuring to market expansion. And again, that one constant, right? It's people, technology wrapped around. And most of the times there's a 50-50 chance that we can be successful. So we know that from research that 34% of change initiatives are actually clear successes. Doesn't mean you don't install it and, you get some adoption, but it's not fully realized, right? Your objectives are not fully met. And that happens very often unless we put the rigor and the focus from a change management perspective into the program. Whether we expect more or the same amount of change in the future, there is still going to be change. So we need to focus on how we help people, how we help the workforce get through it. Next slide, please. So we talked about how much change, capital C, fails, right, in companies. We've seen the 70% fail, 30% are successful, meet their realization goals. There are some key reasons why this happens, right? And if you could see here, a lot of them have to do with people. So you'll notice that the top reasons here are usually involving us humans, right? Or it's people related. So there's resistance, there's sponsorship, there's unrealistic expectations. We may have great strategies and expectations of our workforce, but they can't get through it. So it's unreasonable. So we have to make sure that there's, change fatigue and saturation is eliminated or minimized in the organization as we work through these challenges. We can have the best technology. We can bring the best tools to the organization. However, if it's not adopted and not hopefully institutionalized, right? So we know this is what we do every day and this is what we use and these are the tools that we use, then we're not 100% successful in reaching our true objectives. Next slide, please. Okay. Okay, so there's some additional research we wanted to share. You can tell here there's lots of great information out there. So 135% of C-suite executives, well, I should rephrase that, 135% is the ROI, right, reported by C-suite executives when they were asked to describe their programs. And they said that they had sophisticated programs. So what it tells us here, if we focus on change management, the rigor, and we have it built into our plan, I always say first in, last out, right? Because it's about the people. Our leaders are very successful. And we heard the 70% of change programs fail, and 31% of CEOs are fired for mishandling change. Now, it's not just about mishandling, it's about not meeting their objectives. As you know, it's all connected. And it's clear, right, that the global change management market is actually expected to almost double by 2024 from 2020. And then also digital transformation in the market is increasing day by day. Next slide, please. So as businesses face a constant changing and uncertain environment, it's essential to adapt by embracing technology, accommodating generational changes, right? We've all are living it or have lived it, and adopting a more intentional and agile approach to change. So here's some of the top change management macro trends that we're seeing. And if you think about from a cultural perspective, you know, some of the trends that we're seeing is definitely about culture. You know, so how do we build trust and accountability? And I'm sure all of us have been hearing those things, and probably forever, right? In an organization, how do we address that? Also, building capabilities. We are asked by our clients every day not only to come help them with the transformation from a change perspective, but also to leave behind and build capabilities, build change management offices, so to help them for future initiatives. Also, there's a big focus on how to become a more agile organization and bring people along, whether through technological shifts, regulatory changes, flexibility, adaptability. You know, those are the ones that are top of mind. And the big one here is technology, right? So we know that it's here to stay, AI, big data, analytics. And how do we help our organization through that? Shattering that physical boundaries and empowering the business through technology. Next slide, please. So more data, you know, outperforming organizations and overperforming organizations are change capable organizations. And we know through research that 2/3 are successful, and that most successful are organizations that actually build change capabilities for current and future changes. And transformations are always, you know, most successful if the organization and the leaders can lead from the rigor of change management and the focus on the people side of change. Next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit of a view here, at RGP, we are methodology agnostic. Our framework, we call it return on change, and you can see some of the components there. But what we know is that from experience and best practices and working with our clients, that outperforming organizations focus on leadership alignment. You know, many times our leaders understand what that North Star is, but they're not truly aligned on how they're going to do this. How are they going to bring their people through this, this transformation and change? Engaging the organization, targeted engagement, not communication for communication's sake. How do we bring the people along? And sustaining the change, because it's costly to have to come back and put that energy back into the organization for, you know, any missing gaps or black holes that you might have missed through your installation. Next slide, please. And one of the things that I also wanted to chat about was what we call open source changes. So as we help our organizations through change and transformation, from technology to culture, as we mentioned, you know, those trends, successful organizations involve the workforce in the process from the very beginning. Top-down strategy has gaps and challenges in actually bringing the organization through to adoption and sustainment. So we need to involve the organization early on. Some of you may be familiar with like change agent networks, ambassador networks. these are really important to increase the willingness to change. And some of the stats there you can see in the gray box, and this is by like 1.5 times, right? And that also reduces change fatigue. People better understand what it is that you're expecting of them and their peers. They can also help you course correct some of your change activities, your communication, and how these things land on people. Because it's so important that people say, like, I am part of the change. It's not just happening to me, right? That helps you reduce resistance through the implementation and transition. Next slide, please. So another thing that's really important as you build this coalition of your change agents, your open source activities and networks, is that to drive adoption, you need to make sure that you give the workforce the tools that they truly need, right, to be better informed. You can help them organize, provide them the documents at their fingertips so they don't have to be searching, through a 250, page policy and procedures manual, for example. So to giving them that bite-sized information on what it is that they need is very successful. So that's it from a change management perspective. And, as I always say, in our experiences with our clients, it's really important to have the rigor and the focus on from a change management perspective. And it works very well hand in hand with project management, change management, and also your leadership and sponsorship, which is key to success. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kathy Paisley. Kathy Paisley is the Vice President of Technology at RGP. And Kathy will bring us through generative AI and migration to the cloud. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Hi, everyone. It's great to see you today. And I'm excited to talk about how this all comes together. If you think about what's happening in the world of AI, you're hearing and reading about it pretty much everywhere, and the migration to the cloud. So we're going to talk about the convergence of those two items and how best to capitalize on the extended benefits available. So next slide, please. So this is a recent study from Gartner on the top priorities for CFOs in 2024. Number one, should be no surprise, leading transformation efforts. And most of those have a technology component. So if you think about some of the statistics that Pat and Ken shared about project success, project delays, and the costs associated with those, one of the recommendations from Gartner is to actually improve your chances of success here. It's important for the CFO and the senior finance leaders for these transformation projects to really lean in and hone up on their own digital skills and digital capabilities and knowledge and lead from the front to get the rest of the organization excited about new technologies. And that includes the rest of your staff. Thinking about what makes a project most successful is dedicating a third of their staff to the technology work. So if you think about implementing a large cloud ERP solution, that's quite a few resources from the team. But it's going to help improve their internal skills and capabilities, and also support the adoption of the new systems that are being rolled out. And then, of course, partnering more effectively with the IT teams and your third parties, your system integration firms that are helping to design and configure and stand up these new applications. The next trend is around evaluating and improving your finance function strategy and design. So if you think about how the roles within finance are changing, it's more around technologies and understanding what capabilities and even your core operating model within finance needs to adapt. There's a lot of transactional based activities and resources that have either been outsourced or automated. But this next wave is really adopting AI and machine learning that's also going to transform the roles within the finance team. So think about data scientists, data governance, prompt engineers, and modeling and predictive analytics. how many folks within your current finance team have those roles or those capabilities today? And what do you need to do to build that muscle through retraining, hiring new employees, et cetera? And then third is improving finance metrics, insights, and storytelling. So obviously anybody who's in a CFO role is a storyteller, whether it's to the investors or the PE firms that have invested in you, or private owners. Understanding and being able to tell the story of not only past results, but future forecasts and plans is important. You can't do that if you don't have the basic, accurate data, or too many data sources and formats. You're spending all your time reconciling and trying to prove out the validity of the data instead of building the analytics, building the stories, and understanding what you need to do to get there. Next slide, please. Here's another list of predictions around how generative AI is expanding and growing pretty exponentially. So think about in 2024, which is now this year, 40% of enterprise applications will have embedded AI. And if any of you are in the midst of a cloud ERP implementation, you're seeing that from the major software vendors and other discrete applications in finance, accounting, supply chain operations, et cetera. So the capabilities are already there. We just need to make sure we're taking advantage of them as we implement. Another key trend is about AI augmented development and testing. So again, if you are in the midst of rolling out new internal systems, maybe your SI firm is bringing that test automation to the table as part of the implementation project. And if you're in a development mode of building software and deploying software as part of your products and services to clients, quite likely you've got automated testing either already implemented or you're working on it. Other interesting fact here is by 2026, over 100 million humans will engage robo-colleagues. Think about how the day-to-day roles and responsibilities and jobs performed by your employees will change. And what do you need to do to prepare for that? So next, we're going to focus on how do we bring all of this together? What can financial leaders do to prepare the organization and to maximize the success of initiatives that are either already in flight or planned for the next year or two ahead? So when you think about cloud ERP implementations, it's important to gain a deep understanding of what AI or machine learning capabilities exist in the products that you've purchased, and maybe you've already rolled them out. But prioritize what you can design and implement that is existing in the applications that you're deploying today, and then build that knowledge within your finance team so that you're gaining new insights and you're institutionalizing that new way of working going forward. If you're overhauling your finance function and your operating model, again, think about the roles and responsibilities that need to be done differently. What can you outsource? What can you insource because of automation? And how can you build automation and usability into your day-to-day working environment? Make it like the new standard for how you operate. And then thinking about finance metrics and insights, I think it's very important to start, if you're going to be successful in storytelling, you need to define what those user stories are. What stories do I need to tell? And then go back and cleanse and organize your data so that it's available to build the storyline. We're going to explore some more of that as we move ahead. So next slide, please. Some brief definitions about AI and machine learning. I'm not going to drain all these because you'll be able to read them and think about them as we send this presentation out afterwards. But think about like natural language processing is really kind of a branch of AI that intersects between computers and human language. And so chatbots, virtual assistants, healthcare example, one that I think is fascinating. I think healthcare is kind of way ahead in this space, is you think about if you're at the doctor's office or at the hospital, how much time do the nurses and doctors spend, interacting with their computer and inputting data, asking you questions, inputting data, instead of just using their voice and using that interaction to update automatically, so they're more focused on you and your needs. That's a great example of that one. Next slide, please. Here's some sample use cases that are kind of industry focused. Again, some of these are pretty far advanced, healthcare, financial services firms. You think about automated reconciliation and closing, for example. BlackLine has generated quite a few automatic, enhancements and machine learning capabilities into their products. Same thing for the large ERP solutions that have quite a few process automation, workflows, machine learning built into core functionality that you can take advantage of. Next slide, please. So thinking about the options to get started, if you're still learning about AI and thinking about where you can implement some automation and some improvements, or if you're well along in the journey, here's 4 different options that kind of start with the most basic, low cost, low risk option up to the most advanced. So thinking about ChatGPT, I think everyone has become exposed to that in the last year. The adoption there has been overwhelming, but that's something that you can do to get started. Think about an internal process maybe. Be careful about having a policy or strategy that's going to be focused on security, but also copyrights, plagiarism, etc. The second one is around proprietary models. And again, thinking of the use case of an existing cloud ERP software or a point solution like BlackLine, where there's already some capabilities built in. You can purchase those and implement them pretty easily. And the next round is around APIs. APIs usually traditionally think of in terms of building interfaces or moving data and processes between applications. This is another area where if you've got some internal skill sets or maybe working through a third-party provider, you can implement some API and AI tools with your existing applications. If you're on a legacy ERP system and you don't have access to any of the automatic AI opportunities that have been rolled out recently. And finally, I think the build your own case is the most complex and the highest cost. And this would be for companies in scenarios where you're building products and services using and augmenting different types of AI and machine learning for revenue. So it's part of your services and products that you're building and deploying for your clients. And so other than that, I don't see too many firms embarking on that. It's pretty high cost, pretty high risk. All right, moving on to the next slide. So if you think about the journey of implementing or building AI tools and capabilities within the organization, I think there's a few ideas and considerations for your journey. First, you need to decide what you want to accomplish, and you need to start small. Pick either a low risk area or a high impact area of the organization. Maybe it's a high transaction volume, and use that as your proof of concept. Think about the ability to fail, leverage your learnings, and then move on to the next. So don't just treat it as a one-time event, but kind of build a menu of priorities of areas or functions or business processes that you want to automate, and then work through the list. And you'll learn from experience, you'll gain momentum, and your staff will learn along with you. And think about what works best for your organization and your culture, and make sure that you're analyzing the results and, again, modifying the process as you move ahead. Next slide, please. And obviously, for any of these activities, data is really at the center of the transformation. Unless you've got good, clean data and a normalized data set to work from, it's going to be difficult to see substantial progress. One thing that we've seen from the execution side of these types of initiatives is that data tends to be the long pole in the tent. So having your data cleansed and ready ahead of a project and making sure you've got enough resources assigned to getting that data in the right format and with the right use cases established to really generate the outcomes that you're looking for makes a big difference. I do know one client that was working through an implementation of S/4HANA, and a large global pharmaceutical company, publicly traded, and because their data was not ready for production go live, and they weren't able to accurately test enough volumes of data to get a good understanding of the full end-to-end results, their project was delayed 3 times. And because of their financial structure and financial reporting, each delay was a 3-month delay. So think about that in terms of cost and fatigue on the organization. So anyway, next slide, please. And finally, again, thinking about how the world of data has changed, the whole ecosystem around data sources, data uses, how it's transformed, what services can be provided with your data. There's just a list of do's and don'ts that are recommended. I'm going to stop here before I transition. I saw some chat activity. Are there any questions that we want to address now, or should we keep moving?
Yeah,
No,
I'm sorry. Robert and Terry put in the chat, what technology investment is your firm or company currently investing in? Do you want to take that one?
Sure. As RGP is in the professional services industry, we have been on a journey to replace some of our internal applicant tracking and applicant onboarding systems. And we're also replacing our core ERP financials. We have already been running the business on Workday, HCM, and payroll, and now we're rolling out Workday financials. All right. And I think with that, we can go to the next slide. And at this point, I will be passing the baton to my esteemed colleague, Robert Olczak.
Thanks, Kathy. Next slide, please. So we deliberately crafted this presentation in kind of a funnel approach. You know, one of the things that I most appreciate about the position that I sit in today is that I have the unique opportunity to really engage with CEOs and CFOs of major companies and different firms across a multitude of industry segments. And, you know, conversations going back to the end of last calendar year and even at the beginning of this year have largely stemmed around 3 priorities: cost management, technology investments, and growth of the business to become more competitive. And so when you start looking at the future landscape, regardless of your industry segment, but the future landscape of creating a competitive business environment that can be cash flow positive in unstable and even volatile macroeconomic environments, you really begin to circle back to supply chain resiliency. And I think there's probably 2 words that everybody on this call dreads to hear, because we've heard it in nauseum, is COVID and supply chain resiliency. However, what COVID did do, and it did shine a spotlight on some of the weaknesses within global supply chains, but it also accelerated a lot of these technology investments, whether it be ERP systems, whether it be AI automated technology solutions, from a manufacturing and distribution perspective, advanced robotics. What we're seeing in the marketplace is where you typically had a 15 to 20% early adoption rate in some of the emerging technologies, waiting for those technologies to mature. We're seeing a lot of companies invest much earlier in those digital solutions to create a competitive advantage. And I offer this this definition of supply chain resiliency by Gartner, because supply chain resiliency can mean different things to different companies. And even talking with some of my peers and industry experts, depending on the company and the industry segment, again, it has a different meaning. But one of the things I want to highlight in the definition is modifying supply chain strategies, which do not happen in silos. That has to be directly linked to the organizational strategy, products and technologies. So one of the things that you'll see in 2024 is a greater full integration from product lifecycle, from research and development to go to market to order management to last and final mile delivery, technologies, and then the agility to predict and respond to unanticipated changes. But those changes are not just supply chain related, those are at an organizational level. Next slide. And then part of supply chain resiliency and what's going to become more dominant in 2024 as we look at some of the macroeconomic indicators as well as the domestic microeconomic indicators shows that manufacturing optimization will become a greater focal point as part of the supply chain rigor to establish resiliency. As with a constrained global economic trade environment, the rising cost of the US dollar, China plus one strategies for alternative sourcing of manufacturing and contract manufacturing solutions, diversifying your manufacturing base and supplier base, all of these things are leading or helping to influence the manufacturing environment to find more cost-efficient and more productive ways of doing business, counteracting longer lead times, and anticipated disruptions, both from an import and export perspective. And one of the things that we saw with the PMI index for manufacturing at the back end of 2023 is it came in about 6 points under what it was forecasted to, and that was largely because of some of the geopolitical constraints and tensions that existed, between the U.S. and China and some other countries. All of this is important to note because, as we've been talking about throughout this entire presentation, the focus was on how do you capture ROI. And so as we move to the next slide, one of the things that I would like to highlight is, what does next gen manufacturing optimization look like? Because that's an important component. One of the things that we've seen from industry studies and surveys, specifically within U.S. manufacturing, is a higher involvement by CFOs in formulating strategies and determining where capital investments or operational investments will be made to recoup and develop better sourcing strategies. As part of that, as we talk about ROI, and this is a question that sometimes comes up when I've done these types of webinars or presentations previously, is what is a realistic ROI? And when you talk about making significant, and some of you that are on this call today are probably well on that journey. We realize that going back to 2021, many companies have made capital investments in technology solutions at various levels of the organization. Those investments are expected to continue to increase in 2024 and beyond. And as more money is invested in digital solutions, the question becomes, what is a realistic ROI? And from industry studies and even talking with experts and economists, the ROI should be measured on a 3-year duration. And the reason that we say 3 years is because it usually takes 3 years to reach a maturity level. And when this group has discussed some of the elements of how do you lead enterprise-wide transformation efforts, whether it be supply chain or other aspects of the business, it becomes a gradual progression through what we call a maturity cycle. And I don't have a pictorial on it or a slide, but it's 24/7 monitoring. So when you are sourcing a technology solution, it's being able to define what the problem statement is, clearly articulate what is the best fit technology solution or digital capabilities that need to be achieved. Then you move to proactive mitigation, which is data invisibility. And Kathy hit upon the importance of data quality and data integrity and a single source of data, whether it's a proprietary homegrown system or a third-party vendor system that's brought in to help improve capabilities. Then you move into what we call the fully integrated stage, and that's people process alignment with strategy, and then overall maturity, which gets you to a resiliency standpoint, both at a technology perspective, but us at an organizational level. And I'm not going to hit on all of these because we're running up on time, but I just want to make a quick comment on this slide. Manufacturing optimization traditionally relied on lean manufacturing, Six Sigma, Toyota production systems, and other predominant processes and methodologies. What we're seeing in the marketplace is those processes being augmented by AI technologies, and some of those we've hit upon today. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, manufacturing execution systems. If we go to the next slide, one of the things I really want to hit upon, and these are some of the more dominant areas where companies are investing. You'll see blockchain, manufacturing diversification, inventory optimization. The one that I want to hit on really quick, because I think it's an area that is going to drive competitive advantage in the marketplace, both domestically and globally. And it's an area where we've seen a lot of our own clients start to make significant investments and capitalize on the capability of digital twins. The ability to create virtual environments and run scenarios for all different types of potential outcomes, not only at a manufacturing level, at a supply chain level, at an organizational level. And what this enables you to do is find the most optimal and efficient, the highest quality, the best cost efficient or cost payback, and best go-to-market strategies that mimic a physical environment. So the digital twins, the predictive analytics, the scenario modeling are all things that have really become more mainstream and that companies are really taking full advantage of to make strategic decisions. And when you look at capturing ROI is about better, faster, more accurate decision-making in real time. And that's how you were able to drive forward these initiatives. Next slide. So just a few interesting bits of information here regarding, what some statistics and surveys have shown. 83% of executives say their supply chain investments in technology haven't delivered the expected results. As I mentioned at the onset of the presentation, there's about 4.6 trillion globally spent in IT and technology investments in 2023. And that number is pretty close to and forecasted the same in 2024 and 2025. And then 85% of supply chain leaders plan to deploy some sort of automation in the next 12 months. So this is no longer an option. This is becoming mainstream and part of how we begin to do business and how we're going to continue to do business and attract new skills and new entrants into the workforce and take advantage of millennials and Gen Z and the value that they bring to the table to help drive not only supply chain, but the organizations forward in a more competitive landscape. Next slide. And so I'll conclude with this. Resiliency is not just a supply chain initiative. Resiliency really resides with CEOs and CFOs, and I believe wholeheartedly that they are the cornerstones of building out operational excellence. In fact, I think that's going to become more commonplace. And as we've talked, as Ken talked, and Patricia and Kathy and myself, we've tried to offer insights that are practical, realistic, and easily executable that translate across program management, project management, change management, tech and digital, supply chain. The other elements that are equally important are finance transformation, human capital, and we didn't have a lot of time to go into it in this presentation, but risk and compliance. How you're able to mitigate those risks and anticipate risk, anticipate objections, and work with your third-party suppliers, your vendors, to develop more integrated relationships where there's a better collaboration of information sharing to make more informed strategic decisions about the business. So with that being said, we're going to move into questions and answers. And yes. Ken, if you can go to the next slide, we'll just leave that slide up. Before we answer questions for those that still have a few minutes to stay on, as we send out the presentation, obviously any further information that you would like to know about RGP Consulting Services or Solutions, or any of the information that we discussed today, please feel free to reach out to Kelly Fitzpatrick, and her email is there directly. I'm sure she will not mind having her inbox blown up with a lot of different requests, but I do believe we have time set aside to answer some questions from the audience.
Thank you so much, Robert. And luckily, since this is a quiet group, I did ask some clients beforehand for questions they would like to hear answered. So here's a good one. If we've already made significant investments in technology solutions that are not yielding positive gains, what immediate steps can be taken?
So Kathy, I'm going to let you take that one.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's the reality for most companies and most teams that have gone through this process, either because your timeline got condensed and so you ran out of time and had to pull things out of scope, or your business has changed, right? The best way to start is really understanding and documenting what those pain points are or what those objectives are that maybe were in the initial business case but haven't been realized, and then work through an assessment. Our team does this quite frequently. Come in and go through an assessment of people, process, technology, looking at the configuration, looking at how the business processes have been deployed, and obviously some root cause analysis around pain points and any other kinds of issues that you're still trying to resolve, and then put together a roadmap for remediation and optimization.
And I would just add real quickly, from direct experience and having led various enterprise-wide technology transformations, one of the more common things that we see is really two areas of opportunity: data. So data informs the viability and the return on investment of the system or technology. And two, the foundational principles, processes, standard operating procedures. A lot of times we have, by nature of business, tribal knowledge, we have too many workarounds, or we're not following standard processes, or those processes haven't been updated. And so that really undermines the value contribution of the technology that you're deploying.
Excellent, thank you. And I do recommend.
I just want to ask one. I just want to add one thing, and don't forget your people. So many times they're saturated, right? There's just so many things going on that they can't really, institutionalize, some of their learnings, right? Or the tools are there, they don't know how to use them adequately. So just little information just to keep top of mind.
Well, and Pat, that leads us into our next question very well, but I did just want to put a plug out for the RGP assessment. I've seen it time and time again. It's extremely valuable, low cost and fast, and provides a lot of really good information to companies. So that next question, how do I navigate AI automation and ERP implementations without disrupting the business?
Pat, do you want to cover that, or do you want me to take a stab at it?
Sure, Kathy, go ahead.
Okay. All right. I think, the important thing is really that resource plan. We're working with a large technology company who's planning for their S4 implementation, moving from legacy applications. And just for the finance work stream, they're expecting 500 people to be involved in the project. And so, they've set a goal to have 50% of that be internal. And so pulling people out of their day jobs and making them available to be successfully allocated to the project takes a lot of time and planning. But if you don't resource the project correctly, you're going to end up failing because people are still trying to do their day jobs. And so they've got their mind in two different places, week to week, day to day, and your timelines will extend, which means the cost of your third-party resources will extend, et cetera. And you have the fatigue and the burnout.
I agree. Resource planning is key. So we need to, make sure we have the adequate resources from a BAU perspective, keep the business running, and then who's going to be focused on the project and the plan and implementing. So saturation is a real thing. Burnout is a real thing. So we need to make sure we have guards in place to be able to support the workforce so that we can be successful as leaders and implement and realize what we need from the programs.
And one last point. I think sometimes when we talk about benefit realization, we always do it in best case scenarios. And so we anticipate that we can stretch our folks a little more, that we'll be able to find people in the market a little easier, that everything will align and make it happen. And so one of the things that is part of being delivery agile is being able to look at those things that are adjustments. You cannot build lockdown plans for every contingency, but you can be honest with yourself and with your team about what the cost potentially can be, and then be able to stretch that.
Perfect. Well, as we're at time, I want to thank you, Ken, Pat, Kathy, and Robert for your expertise. This was really informative and fantastic. We will be getting the deck and recording out to all participants. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. You all have a great day.